Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Awake and Thriving podcast. Today we have with us Dr. Paul. Hey, Dr. Paul. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yes. So we're going to go over a ton of stuff today. And I talked to you a little bit before, and I've been wanting to have someone in neurosurgery on my podcast. And coincidentally, I got an email about 2 days later after that thought, and here you
Wow.
are.
Yeah, that's crazy how that worked out. No,
Yeah.
it's really a honor to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, we're going to start off with how sleep affects our brain, which is actually playing out in my household right now, which is coincidental because we're actually having this debate in my house right now. So, I'd
I
love
think,
to hear everything you say.
yeah, I think it's probably in most people's households if they have children and others, pets,
Yes.
perhaps
Yeah.
that may cause some trouble with sleeping there. But certainly, sleep is invaluable. Um, Sleep is that moment in our lives where well, I know as kids, most kids don't want to sleep, but it's so important, and it's that moment where the body's allowed to recharge. That's the best way I put it when I'm talking to patients and giving lectures. Sleep is that time where it's kind of like plugging in your electric car or putting gas into your car. It replenishes your body in every aspect that you can imagine, and and as a neurosurgeon, I see that a lot in patients where they're not getting enough sleep and they're cognitively or their minds are not working at the pace that they're normally used to. And then they get very nervous, they get very worried. They say, what's going on? I'm forgetting words. I can't say sentences like I used to. I can't put a story together. I can't say jokes, whatever it is. There's a change. And usually it relates in some form or another to a sleep deprivation. And the mind is like a muscle. I mean, it's not a muscle, but it's like a muscle in that it needs to have that time where it's not used, believe it or not. And so sleep is that moment in time where we're literally able to lay flat, or some people sleep sitting up, I guess. But and it allows our whole body, but especially our mind, to just not be utilized for a certain period of time. And that lets all these circuits and these neurons that are running rampant, that are just having all these signals running through them, to just take a break and to recharge. And psychologically as well. I mean, as let's say one day goes on, with all the stress that's put on our bodies, the brain takes a beating. Our bodies also take a beating as well. We're like a shell, and we go out into the world and we're exposed to the sun, to screaming people, to angry people, to whatever in the world, cars that are coming right at you sometimes, unfortunately, in a lot of cases that I see. And so it's like we're a shell. And so our bodies and our minds take this beating, and we need that opportunity to, I guess, to decompress, to relax. And sleep is so critical. And I know, like, believe me, as a neurosurgeon, I'm probably deprived of sleep myself, just because of all the hours I put in over many, many years now. I mean, it's crazy. I can't even, if I told you these stories, you would like go nuts. Operating like without sleep after 3 days, it's just like craziness what happens. But that's the reality of it. And it's not healthy. It's not healthy to do that. Sleep is very important, very valuable. People that don't have sleep, they develop cardiac problems, they develop obesity, actually. Um, and they're just cognitively slower. Some people say Alzheimer's may kind of start because of sleep deprivation. So there's a wide variety of disorders that can happen to the body. So sleep is so valuable. I cannot emphasize that enough. And it is imperative that we get at least, I would say, 6 hours of sleep. every night. And some people ask me, what about those cat naps? Can we do that? I think that's totally fine. I think studies have shown significant benefit by taking 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and just taking a break in the middle of the day if you can. Kids do that. I mean, my kids, we put them to sleep around 12 for about 30 to 45 minutes or an hour in the middle of the day, and they wake up so rejuvenated. So why can't we as adults do that? I know there's work and this and that, but there should be a way to find some time to lay flat and just close your eyes for a little bit.
And I know this is not something we totally discuss, but what do you think about like, so laying flat, do you think like meditation and stuff like that, any kind of quiet time is just good for you during the daytime?
Yeah, I think it could vary depending on the person, but anything that allows you to lay down, close your eyes, and let that brain just kind of not think about
Mm.
the issues in your life, etc. I think that's so invaluable, and you see it in patients that just lack it. So if you see patients that lack sleep, that's how you really look at the value of it. And also us, I mean, when we don't sleep, we feel miserable. I mean, I feel terrible, and I'm sure we all do. It's just your eyes are heavy, you can barely think. I mean, it's just there's so many um, ways of showing how important sleep is, especially when you don't have it. I think that's when you really value it.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you said that there's correlations between your heart, like heart disease and even obesity when it comes to sleep deprivation. That makes sense, but I never thought to link those to it. So
Yeah, no, it's been well studied. It's very clear out there that cardiovascular health is affected big time in patients or people that don't get the proper amount of sleep and rest. And not everyone needs like the specific 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep. Everyone's made differently, but and of course there's the whole genetic aspect. Some people need more sleep than others genetically, which is fine. But we're all pretty similar. I mean, we're all humans. We're all basically the same. And so within that acceptable range, you have to get that amount of sleep. That's just so valuable. I cannot emphasize that enough, believe me.
okay. All right. That's good to know because there's definitely people in the audience, especially in America, where we're just running like crazy and we don't
Yeah.
think we're like, let's squeeze out 2 hours from our bedtime in order just to get more work done. Because I think that happens a ton in America.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And get this. I mean, just us even asking our superiors, let's say, can I take a break? Or can I just get a day off? I mean, you get scolded. I mean, it's like, what's going on? Like someone's asking you to take some time off for a reason. I mean, they're not just saying I just want to go to Magic Mountain or go bungee jumping. I mean, they need a break. I mean, we're human, we're not robots,
Yeah.
and human beings need a break. And just to even ask that question, you get killed, especially in medicine. Let me tell you, like in medicine, it's like if you show any sign of weakness, that's it. That's it. You're like put in a different, like totally different world. You're not even like with anyone anymore. It's totally mind-boggling, very unhealthy, and um, something to think about for your audience.
Yeah. And I hopefully in the future that'll change. But I do know if you're in the healthcare system, it should be okay to take a rest because you guys work a ton. And when you get in trouble or be made to feel bad for taking a break.
Let me tell you a good story, actually. I think you guys will like this. Really quick. It's really quick. One of the hospitals I work at, I'm gonna keep that nameless, that hospital, okay? So this is how it is. So you do call, and you're very busy, but you do call, and you get maybe a break here and there, middle of the night. And so my first day at this hospital, I'm doing call, just finished a case, okay, and I'm like, I'm tired, like I don't want to drive home. I'm gonna go sleep in the call rooms, right? Okay. So in the call rooms, I go down into the dungeons. It's like, first of all, it's like 4 levels underground. I don't know why. Okay, but that's just how it is. So, okay, cool. So I'm underground, multiple levels. Now I'm going through these corridors trying to find which one of these doors is actually the call room. So, okay, so I see the signs. So I follow the signs to the call room. I see one side says the corpse room. Okay, so there's a corpse room and a call room. Okay, they're like the signs are like right on top of each other, both with the same arrow direction. So I'm like, okay. So I follow that. I go and so I see the call room finally, and the door next to the call room is the corpse room.
Oh my gosh.
It's like you're sleeping there, and next door is a corpse room. It's how do you even sleep? I mean,
No.
by the smell. I mean, forget about it. This is
That is
medicine.
awful.
This is medicine. I know, crazy.
Oh. Okay, so the sleep, super important. How does, because a lot of people, when they get home from work, they want to decompress. And how do they decompress? They decompress a lot of times with alcohol or
It's true.
maybe other stuff. How does that play into not only like your brain, but your sleep?
Yeah. So, you know, uh, alcohol um, and other drugs uh, do play a big role in affecting someone's cognition and sleep. Um, Certainly, some people drink themselves to oblivion. I've seen that numerous times where unfortunately people do have a problem. They do have a health problem. It needs to be diagnosed. They need to be treated for, let's say, an addiction, or alcohol addiction problem or a drug addiction problem, cocaine or whatever other drugs are out there. Painkillers are a huge thing right now, huge, because doctors are literally prescribing this and patients are literally going to a pharmacy getting it, and most are taking it and taking it in overdoses, or they're selling it, you know, for a big amount of money on the street. So it's just crazy what's going on with all these different drugs, and certainly a glass of wine a night is totally fine. I don't want to be here and say like don't drink, don't do any of this. A glass of wine a night is actually very healthy. It's been shown to be so. It thins your blood out. It makes your body and your heart healthy. But in excess, alcohol and some of these other drugs do affect your body, especially sleep. These drugs, for example, that are uppers, the upper drugs, cocaine, amphetamines, all these things. These prevent you from sleeping. These activate our system called the sympathetic nervous system, which is a fancy word for the system that controls our fight or flight response. Like if you saw a bear, what's going to happen? That's your fight or flight response. You're going to run. Your heart rate's going to go up. You're going to start sweating. You're going to lose your appetite. So that's what happens with these uppers. And one of those things that happens is you lose sleep. You're just wired. And so patients that are addicted to these medications will unfortunately have these associated cognitive issues because they're just not getting the appropriate sleep. They're just exhausted, but yet their body's keeping them up. So their body's running, but their brain is just like beat, it's just tired. And they just cannot rest. They can't let their bodies heal. And So it's a major, major problem. I recently had a patient the other day on call, methamphetamine abuse. She was in her 50s and doing that, and it popped a blood vessel in her brain. And it's actually quite common to get that from doing drugs. And so she was left really debilitated with a massive stroke. And I think she's still in the hospital now. But so, there's a lot of things that could happen with these medications or drugs that are taken in excess. Like I said, a glass of wine a night is fine, but in excess, that could be a major health problem.
Definitely. And do you see, it was always shocking to me when I always saw patients, and I don't know why. I think as a society, we think people that do drugs are young or only young,
Yeah,
but they're not.
no, not at all. No.
There's a lot of older people that do, I don't want street drugs like you would imagine are street drugs. And that always shocked me when I saw that. For some reason, we
Yeah.
always imagine 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, but not 50-year-olds.
Yeah, and it still shocks me every time I see patients that come in that are a little bit older, because you wonder, like, you never thought, like, if someone would reach that age that they would kind of have the or I guess inability to control themselves. Like they're controlled by substances even at that age. So it's very scary in the sense, and some of these patients have these genetic predispositions so that they just do these things once, they're just hooked, and it's often a genetic thing passed down from family to family. But yeah, I see that all the time in a wide variety of age groups where people are just addicted to alcohol, drugs, and I see the neurological consequences all the time, and it's really so sad and devastating. So we have to really help them out the best way we can.
And I imagine when you do those surgeries on patients that have those issues already, they may not follow through with aftercare. They may not have the best nutrition or even the stuff they put in your body. So you can do the best work you can, but if you don't have somebody trying to help themselves, you'll just get them back as a patient for something else.
Yeah, and that's actually a really important point that you brought up, because I like to say I have a huge homeless population in my practice. I'm actually proud of it, and I've done many surgeries on some of these homeless patients for, let's say, blood clots in their brain or spinal surgery, and a lot of them, unfortunately, they go back out and do the same things that that got them there in the first place, and it's sad to see that a lot of repeat offenders come in, and I know them, some of them, and it's the same thing. They got assaulted or they were drinking too much and fell, or drugs, all of that. So you're right. I think having a place to go and having a family, having someone to care for you and help you is so vital.
Yeah, definitely. I spoke to somebody, and this is just from a different episode, and she was talking about addiction and how some people use addiction as a way to bond with something if they don't have someone to bond with. So if they don't
Oh,
have a family member or anyone to care for, what can they bond with to get that feel of love that we're going to talk
wow.
about? It'll be with an addiction like a drug because they'll get that bond from it.
Oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. That is so true, though. That
Yeah.
makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does. So, but that's another one. But this is my first, like, just talking about even alcohol and drugs and addiction. That was just a recent thing that I've started talking
Yeah.
about because people were interested in that, and especially in the last year, I'm sure, unfortunately, some of those habits have peaked their head in some people's lives, considering we've been in solitude for so long.
Yeah, you hear these stories, and yeah, people are having a rough time out there for the most part. Most people are having a rough time, and it's it's not easy going through a pandemic, which is what we all have gone through and are still going through.
Yeah.
Who would have thought, we'd be living our lives and going through this, and it's kind of something that we see in the movies or we read books about, but we actually have seen it firsthand. And I think as a country, and as a world, as a united world, I think we've all learned a lot. We've become sad in the sense of losing some people that we love, but we've also learned a lot, and hopefully we can prevent this from happening again in the future.
Yes, definitely. And it's interesting that we're actually living through history. Like we've read about the Spanish influenza, but we're going to be a part of the history books and not the greatest way we would want to be
Yeah,
part of the history books.
I wish there were some different things done. I think we definitely could have made some bigger changes to prevent what unfortunately transpired, but it is what it is, and I think we're going to move forward and and try and prevent this from happening again.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I love this already. So we tapped on love a little bit.
Yeah.
But, and I think this is like a big question. Like, what is love? How do you feel that in your body? But from your perspective, you can tell us a little bit more about that besides just us getting butterflies in our stomach.
Yeah, no, and it is a tough question to answer. And I think Hadaway, do you know if you remember the group Hadaway?
Mm.
Hadaway was this band that wrote the song "What Is Love," right? That famous song "What Is Love." That I don't know if he found love, but certainly it is a question that people have asked for millennials, for many years, thousands of years, and we scientists have been able to parcel out what love is on a molecular level. Obviously, there's other things about it, but on a molecular level, um, we figured out what love really is. And really, what it comes down to is really two things. So, one is stress, and the other thing, I'm sure we can all guess this, is hormones. And so that's what love comes down to. And the stress part of it really is that that cortisol secretion, that steroid secretion from our body that makes us take risks. Okay, we may like someone, or we may want to do a podcast, or go on TV, or write a book, or whatever. And it's that initial that stress that you need that little bit of stress to kind of take on risks that you otherwise wouldn't take on, because anything in life could be challenging, and so you don't want to take it on. So it's understandable, but sometimes you need to take those risks. You need to have that little cortisol secretion, that stress in your life, to really say, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to do that. Okay, so that's a huge part of love, because otherwise you don't experience it. You need to take those risks, ask someone out, or you know talk to someone, call someone. That's very important. And then on top of that, you need the hormones. Without the hormones, there's these little molecules circulating in your blood, then nothing really happens. So these hormones are, uh, if you want to imagine, like these little structures that are millimeters or even less in size, but they're so important, so valuable in your life. There's hormones like we have testosterone, we have estrogen, and both men and women have both of those, by the way. We have hormones like epinephrine or norepinephrine, or dopamine. You may have heard of dopamine, or serotonin, oxytocin, vasopressin. I could go on for days, but these are the fancy hormones that make love love. And there's different phases. Okay, there's lust phase, there's that attraction phase, then there's the attachment phase. So those three stages of love are valuable, and they're seen in everyone. We all experience it. And for example, in that lust phase, that initial phase where you're lusting someone, or you're really attracted to someone, you have a lot of testosterone for men, and for women, estrogen that's secreted. That's secreted from our reproductive organs, but it starts from a hormone that's secreted from our hypothalamus of our brain, called the gonadotropin releasing hormone. It's a fancy hormone that's secreted from our pituitary gland and hypothalamus, and it goes down into our blood and causes our reproductive organs to then secrete these hormones that make us feel lust. And then we move on to the attraction phase, where you have a little bit of a different hormonal balance here. In this stage, you have predominantly a lot of dopamine being secreted, a lot of epinephrine and norepinephrine, and a decreased amount of serotonin. And so these are a variety of hormones that are triggered by the brain that, let's say, make our heart rates go up. So like we feel like a little nervous, our heart rate goes up, we may sweat a little, we lose our appetite because we're nervous about something, so we can't really eat during that time. So those are the things that we experience during that attraction phase, because of these hormones I just mentioned. And then finally, in the The last stage of love, it's called the attachment phase. It's kind of the more stable time, more stability with love. You feel very comfortable with the person. So what is that comfort feeling of love? Well, that's because of hormones called vasopressin and oxytocin. These are also secreted from the pituitary gland of the brain, and they suppress the other hormones that we just talked about. They just calm you down. They make you feel secure. You just have that feeling of security, and you're not worried as much. You're kind of happy with that particular feeling in the moment in your life. That's because of those two hormones I just discussed. And so love is complicated yet simple. It's really what I just mentioned, and so it does take that stress initially, and then it does take those hormones to then kind of merge together and work so that we can get that wonderful feeling. And I do have to say, since we did talk about addiction right before this, I need to mention how there is some addiction that could be involved with love. And why do I say that? I call it a pseudo addiction. I don't call it like a drug addiction. I call it a pseudo addiction. And the best way to show that is that, let's say, you have all these dopamine hormones and norepinephrine hormones running in your body. It makes you feel this high. It's like this really good feeling that you have, that I hope we all have experienced or will experience. It's just such a good feeling where you just feel, wow, like your heart feels strong. You have all this energy. You feel like you can do anything you want during that particular period of love. But then on the contrary, you have these moments in time where, unfortunately, let's say something did not work out to your liking, or, things happen in life where love may not pan out, or there are breakups, etc. And you just feel like this low, okay? And it's like a withdrawal. And so what would make you feel like that? I mean, that's kind of like how cocaine or drugs make you feel when you take them and when you stop taking them, in a weird way. That's what happens. Well, in an interesting way, love, even though it's not really something that's edible or usable, it's something you feel, but yet it causes this type of pseudo addiction response in our bodies as human beings. And even pets, have been studied, and pets go through that. So it's something so real, and it may be intangible, but love is very, very real, and it's biochemically really well studied and very fascinating.
And so I imagine people that have been together for years still emit like the same hormones for comfort.
Yeah, and some of these other hormones also can come back in different stages. There's often this whole mix, because at some point in your relationship, you may kind of feel some stress, and you may feel these butterflies coming back occasionally. So there's all these different mixes of emotions back and forth. So it's not like if you passed the attraction stage that you're never gonna come back to it. No, there's kind of this ebb and flow back and forth throughout life, but yes, generally over time, there's more stability.
Okay. So I wanted to chat with you about two more things.
Sure.
So, and this is one I didn't talk to you about, but it was one thing that I had on the email: boosting your brain, like boosting or helping it out or optimizing it. What do you recommend for that?
Yeah, so that's kind of the $1 million question. What do you do to become smarter, in a sense? And basically, we touched on one of them already. So one is sleep. Okay, so sleep is a natural way to enhance your brain and your brain function, period. It's been shown in numerous studies, no doubt about it. Need to get your sleep. But what else could potentially improve your cognitive function? Obviously, avoiding illicit drugs and excessive alcohol intake. alcohol has been shown to actually kill neurons, unfortunately. So in excess, it's not good for your brain function. You actually lose neurons, which are the cells of the brain. So that's important to understand. That's why when you do a CAT scan of let's say, a patient who's an alcoholic, and you compare it to a patient who's not an alcoholic, the brain of an alcoholic is actually much smaller in weight and on how it looks. It's just shrunk down. We call that atrophy of the brain. That's
Really?
because, yeah. That's because the brain cells are being killed, and that person is killing his or her own brain cells by the intake of these medications, or let's say alcohol in this instance. So certainly avoidance in excess is critical. And what I always like to say is, I always like to say, use your brain. If you use your brain, that is really helpful. They say, for example, for Alzheimer's disease, one of the things to prevent or to slow down Alzheimer's is to use your brain. Okay, and use structures, use the structures of the brain for memory, as opposed to looking back at a book to find something. Think about it, try to remember that particular aspect yourself, and then go check it out. So utilizing things like that, or trying to drive somewhere, what I like to do is I like to try to remember how to get there without having to put in a MapQuest or my Waze app. I think that also is a good way to utilize your brain to remember, how to get to a certain place. I think that's very valuable, and it utilizes those neurons in the hippocampus of the brain, which is where your memory functions are really happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I've heard about that before, especially as you get older. And those are things I'm going to have my dad do, because he's living alone, and I can tell he needs a little bit more activity up there. So,
Absolutely.
okay. All right. So I know that you are an avid author. You have a few books that you've written. So I have a question for you.
Sure.
What books are you reading right now? Any
Ooh,
books that you're reading that you love?
yeah. Well, I'm reading a book. Let's see, it's called The Great Influenza. I don't recall the author. I don't have it in front of me now, but it's a great book, The Great Influenza. A good friend of mine gave it to me. He's one of the top lawyers in the country. He gave it to me, and I've been enjoying it. It's a big book, so get ready to read. It's all small font, but it's so fascinating. It talks about the history of the Spanish flu, the great influenza, what they went through, how they got through it, the great scientists of the time that were trying to steer the country to safety, kind of like what's his name? I forget.
Fosse?
Yeah, like Fauci, like him. So it talks about all that history, and fantastic. I read a book last week called I think the perils of COVID-19, or something of that nature. It's written by Dr. Caldwell, Cauldwell. Very quick read, nice read about the basics of COVID-19 and what to do to prevent it, what goes on in our bodies with it, etc. That was a really neat book I finished last week.
Okay. I'm the great influenza. I know it sounds
Mhm.
daunting from what you described it as, but that sounds like a good book to read, especially considering what we've gone through or going through, depending on how you're looking at all of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I recommend those. And I'll let you know if there's any other cool ones. I'm doing a lot of reading all the time. So, but those are the last two that I've been working on.
Perfect. And then one last question, because we've been on for a while. It's going to be really
Mhm.
quick. What this is going to be random. What is your breakfast in the morning? What do you like to eat in the morning for breakfast?
Wow.
Do
Okay.
you eat breakfast?
Yeah, let's see. I don't like to eat a heavy breakfast. I know that.
Okay.
It's so funny because I was just talking to my wife about that this morning. It was really, wow, how you knew that. But essentially, I like a small breakfast. Like today, I had it's like a piece of pound cake with some tea. That's what I had. Um, I don't like to eat a heavy breakfast. I think it kind of slows you down because then I have to go to the operating room where I have to see patients all day and it's like too much, I think eating a good dinner for me, I think is valuable because I think it takes me to the next day, you know?
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you, Dr. Paul, for being on. I really appreciate all of your info and all the little tidbits
Anytime.
you gave us.
My pleasure. Anytime. Happy to come back.
Thank you.